broke down and take it back to Portsmouth. Pretty much sums up the country. Notting Hill, should it be shut down? Probably. Lots more to do. Loads of your calls, of course, as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Things aren't any better. We're still just as badly off as we were yesterday, but we're still hopeful that it will actually get better. I don't know when, but, you know, trust me, it will happen. This is the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Let's get on it. I'm delighted to say, joining me in the studio live right now is William Clouston. William, very good morning to you.
Great to be back.
Looking
thanks.
very summery, I must say. I mean, some people think this is the last day of summer, 31st of August, but I don't think so.
Take it when it's there. Yeah, wait until the winter. I'll put the
Now,
heavier
normally
clothes.
You get down this way by train. Did you do that today?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday, how was it? Because I'm keen to find out how the trains are running, because I walked through London Bridge Station yesterday as I was on my way out to dinner, and I could see a whole list of cancellations to various points, east, west, north and south.
Yeah,
so it seems to me it's still not really working very well.
It was fine yesterday for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on time. It was a little bit late getting out of Newcastle, but it was fine.
You expect that? I mean, as long as they're running is all I care about.
No, it was fine.
Okay, good. Let's talk about Mikhail Gorbachev, a man who you and I both probably remember as a rather benevolent Russian leader, the man who kind of started the whole movement of bringing Russia back into the civilized world, and a man who should be remembered probably as a very significant character, right?
Massively significant, yeah. Statesman in the age of statesmen. We don't have too many statesmen now, do we? But he was an important figure because he recognised that you couldn't go on. You know, the system he was running, the Soviet Union was getting into severe economic trouble. Yeah. And I think actually the latter part of the Cold War, Caspar Weinberger and Reagan deserve credit actually for ending it, because actually Weinberger's arms race actually bankrupted the Soviet Union. And that was I don't know whether sort of by accident that happened or whether it was a brilliant piece of strategy. Yeah, I mean, Thatcher also played her part. Yeah, she did. The Thatcher-Reagan sort of axis really was too strong for Russia to bear, wasn't it? Yeah, I think Gorbachev likened the Soviet economy to a sort of old bit of farm machinery. He said he loosened it up and it just fell apart. Yeah. Obviously, he's criticised in the Soviet Union or in Russia now for what happened. But I don't think there was an easy way. There wouldn't have been an easy way for an entity like that to collapse. No. I mean, it's a bit like Afghanistan now. There's not a good way of getting out of certain things. And you can imagine as well the people in the Kremlin that would have wanted him not to do what he went and embarked upon, because people have been killed for less in Russia. For sure. But he realised it and that the game was up, and I think it was probably a smoother transition as you could get. So he deserved a lot of credit for that. And you and I are old enough, we are Cold War kids. Yeah. We grew up in this environment. When, there were times you think, when's it going to end? Yeah. I mean, I don't remember ever feeling fearful that, some bomb was going to land in London. No. But there was always a sense that Russia was quite a dangerous place, wasn't it? It was a hideous state. Yeah. I mean, I interviewed a friend of mine, Constant Kissin, the other day for SDP Talk. Oh, yeah. And he was talking about his background, because his backstory is very important to him and his new book. And he mentioned something startling fact. His grandmother was born in a gulag for having the wrong... Literally, she was in a concentration camp for having the wrong opinions. Yeah. She lives in Bristol now. Right. This is a living memory, and we shouldn't forget it. No, and as much as we like to joke about the wokists being very intolerant of life, I mean, no matter how ridiculous Bristol can be, and it can become, it's never going to be quite that bad. It's not the gulag. It's not quite. I mean, they do tear down statues. Yeah, they do. And they do have a go at the police for one reason or another, and they have banned diesel cars for the centre of town. And the courts let people off for tearing down statues. But they haven't quite reached those levels. But let's actually go back and look at Ronald Reagan, because apart from anything else, one of the things I loved about Ronald Reagan was he was the ultimate communicator. They called him the great communicator. He had been an actor. He was a union leader in Hollywood and all of that. But have a look at this, and if you haven't ever seen this, just marvel at this talent.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
What you're seeing there is the physical dismantling of the Berlin Wall, which I think certainly, I mean, I've never been to Berlin, still, even now, and I mean, I'd love to go, and I will go, hopefully before I die.
Fine city. But
the idea that Germany was cut in half into East and West Germany, and East Germany was a horrific place. We've all seen the movies about the Stasi, the Life of Others, which is incredible. Yeah. You would go to Europe and you would have this sense that somewhere in the middle of Europe was this barrier. to freedom.
It's astonishing. Yeah, so I had a friend when my first degree was planning, and I had a friend who's Polish, Anglo-Polish, and he went back to Poland during martial law under Jaruzelska, and he said, "Do you want to come along to Warsaw?" I said, "Yeah, let's go." We were bugged everywhere. Secret police looking at you. You couldn't move. Literally, it was an interesting experience. It was the first time, Mike, that I saw two species of truth, and we're getting like that here. The public truth, the Pravda truth. No one believed anything that was in the papers or uttered by the news, and people couldn't speak their truth publicly. All the truth they had was what he called dinner table truth. And it's getting a little bit like that now, where people say, well, I can't say this and I can't say that. And it's very interesting going and seeing it and witnessing it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, of course, the end result of that is that it becomes a very deadly world, because you can be reported and you can be locked up for life. Workplace. Or you can be, executed for having the wrong thoughts.
That's exactly what Constance said. His grandparents were locked up for saying something at work. That actually happened.
Absolutely extraordinary. My other Russian story revolves around Boris Yeltsin. It would have been shortly before Yeltsin kind of took over, and he was being hailed as the sort of the next big guy, and he came to America, and it would have been, I guess, around about 91-ish or something like that. Yeah. And he came to Washington DC to have a meeting with, I guess it would have been George Bush, because Clinton hadn't quite got in.
Yeah, it was Bush.
And we staggered around Washington, and he loved the bars, and he was in and out of all these bars.
Did he stagger?
He didn't actually stagger at that point.
Right.
Because I was I've always been a reasonably good drinker. This guy, I've never seen anybody drink Jack Daniels like it. I mean, he was literally drinking it by the bottle. Yeah. And he then suddenly declared one night at about 10 o'clock, and he was surrounded by all these kind of, American diplomats, that he wanted to go and see the breadbasket of America, because that was his big thing, because Russia then, I suppose, still included Ukraine. And
you get him a breadbasket.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they did think of that, but he was like, no, I want to go to see it. So they took him to the Midwest, and we all got on a plane the next day to somewhere like Des Moines, Iowa. And all got out, staggered about, went to a couple of farms. In fact, I was staying in a hotel. It was Wichita, Kansas we ended up in. Right. And I was staying in a hotel, and in the middle of the night, all these sirens were going off, and apparently there was a tornado warning. And I was like, yeah, that'll be fine. And they came and actually dragged me out of the bed and said, look, you've got to go downstairs. There's a tornado. And I looked out the window. Really? One side of the street was completely black, and the other side was completely, light. It was dawn.
Isn't it odd character, Yeltsin? I mean, he stood on a tank and probably prevented a revolution. So, yeah, but I wonder how many of his decisions were entirely sober.
Yes, I mean, I think the amount he drank as a world leader probably wasn't great. Yeah. In terms of whether, because we all know if you make decisions when drunk, that's one thing, but when you make decisions when you're really hungover, also bad.
Also bad.
You wake up in the morning and you go, no, that's fine. I mean, in some ways, it's amazing that he lasted as long as he did. Yeah. But I mean, what a period! And how did we get here from there?
Well, it's interesting. John Gray, a political philosopher who I have a lot of respect for, wrote a piece around then, and it was all about what the new Russia would be like. What was the new Russia going to be like? And he wrote a piece a little bit controversial at the time. He said the new Russia be rather like the old Russia. Yeah. And actually, in a way, that sort of happened. Yeah.
And I guess you could almost blame the West in a way for not thinking about it enough and just going, this is great. Yeah. Now we've got, I mean, a bit like the way that they didn't see the Balkans War coming. They didn't understand the tension. They didn't, in the same way they couldn't do much about what was happening in Pakistan and India and Afghanistan. They didn't see the Taliban. They didn't see Al-Qaeda coming. I mean, there's been a lot of failings in Western intelligence, it seems to me.
Shocking failings, but probably none bigger than the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, which we discussed before. The Afghanistan War, a project to impose by force liberal values on a society that was not particularly interested.
It doesn't understand it.
And that was probably the most foolish error you could make. So, yeah, I'd accept that.
Yeah. Let's have a watch of one of our MPs this morning. Victoria Atkins was on breakfast talking to Julie Hartley-Brewer, and Julie was trying to convince her of the folly of net zero. Have a look at this.
I'm delighted to say has set a policy, a clear policy intent that we will be independent, fuel independent, energy independent by the 2040s. That is a laudable commitment, and one I very much hope we'll be able to take.
Hey, I think that'd be wonderful. We'll all just be cold and poor until then. Brilliant.
Independent.
Victoria, just fine.
No, that again, Julia. That's not.
No, we are. We're going to be cold and poor for the next few years.
We've got a very difficult winter coming up.
Yes, we're going to be cold and poor.
This is going to be the defining feature of this new government.
She's talking on behalf of Rishi Sunak, talking about how we're going to be self-sufficient in energy. You know, we're not going to be self-sufficient in energy for a very long time. We'll talk about this in a moment. We'll take a little break. But I just wanted you to see that before. They seem, MPs, to be completely unaware of people's concerns, completely blind to the fact that their pursuit of net zero has got us here and will not help us in any way, shape or form. But William Clouston is here. We'll take your calls, of course, as well, 0344 499 1000. Ironically, the last person to die trying to escape from East Berlin lost his life in March 1989, just 8 months before the wall came down, says Terry in Ramsbottom. It was a fascinating period of history. We'll talk about that some more, with much else besides as well. Net zero, no thank you. This is Talk TV. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. We're talking to William Clouston from the SDP. They've got a conference coming up shortly, I think. We'll talk about that in a second. Bit of breaking news. Eurozone inflation, William, has reached a record 9.1%. So for all those Ramonas who go, well, it's not as bad as this in Europe. And well, apparently it is as bad as this in Europe.
Well, the Ramonas don't seem to be able to look at figures. We've grown, this country's grown broadly in line with... You know, I said the other night, actually, you know one of those little horse ride races at the seaside, you know, the little amusement arcade thing. If you did a blind testing, you said that's Britain, that's France, that's Germany, that's Italy, you wouldn't be able to tell which country had left the Eurozone.
Yeah, exactly right. And they've all got problems with energy. But there is this sort of unfortunate, you know, headlong rush into net zero, which even now, when you would think that they would see the folly of it, is continuing. You know, the best we've got is Liz Truss saying, "Oh, we might suspend the green levies." John Rentoul was in here yesterday saying that the green levy actually is less important now than it was because it's not as big as a proportion of the thing. However, it's not so much the green levy though as the green subsidies, which the companies also then charge us.
Yeah, sure.
So you know, it's not as simple as that to say, "Oh, the green levy as a proportion of the actual kilowatt per hour charge is reduced," because there are other factors that come into play, aren't there?
Yeah, but I mean, there's a headlong rush now from Tories to say we need energy resilience and energy self-sufficiency. Yeah. I wish they'd thought of that 25 years ago. Why do you need a major crisis before they wake up?
Well,
we've
seen both Nick Clegg and what's his face, the Ed Davey, Sir Ed Davey, laughably called Sir Ed Davey, gloating about how they managed to stop fracking and nuclear development.
Yeah, and they ruined the balance of payments in the process. Ed Davey would prefer us to import energy and hydrocarbons and gas from other places rather than use what we've got. So he's actually responsible.
And that's hypocritical, surely, because one, it's not green. It just means that you can pretend that you're green, but you're actually not because you're importing the stuff that you refuse to make yourself.
You ruin the balance of payments. What these people don't understand is that we have to pay for this stuff. If you've got your own, you don't.
Yeah,
you might even export some of it.
It's like saying I don't eat anything because I don't cook anything, but I order it all in from Just Eat.
Crazy. And they could have 20 years ago. I'm pro net zero targets, but not before you've built the nuclear power station.
Yeah, but why
you don't need, but
because nobody else has told me why.
You can do it, but you can't do it without.
Yeah, but why do it though?
Well, carbon is there. I mean, I'm not against it. We've largely decarbonised as a society because we've deindustrialised. I think we've done it. We're only 1% anyway. I think there's a massive preoccupation with it. It's not mine.
And with the greatest respect to you, William, and I do respect you, but you are doing what everybody else does, which is not telling me why you want net zero. Net zero doesn't mean anything to most people. When I ask people who are supposedly experts, I say, "What is net zero?" They can't tell me. How will it help us? They can't say.
It won't. It doesn't help this country particularly because you're only 1%, but the global effort to try and reduce carbon use is sensible. What I'm against is governments imposing it on people and imposing poverty on people because they haven't planned.
Right.
You didn't
need
to do,
what's happening.
And that's what's happening. And then when they do try and plan, they don't have the country's best interests at heart. Hinkley C and Sizewell, both of those major projects are going ahead. They've asked the French to do it. I would argue you've got to really hate this state to say we can't do this.
But we have no expertise in it because we haven't done it for such a long time.
Yeah, and that's the government's fault because we're governed by a political class.
And there are only two countries that can build nuclear plants, and it's China and France. And I guess you'd have to say France is preferable to China.
Yeah, well, it obviously
you know what
it is,
but we shouldn't have.
Yeah, I know. And I said, I said in 2019 at the conference that it's like our communications network. Any government that outsources that to the Chinese Communist Party is not only wrong, it's insane to do that. Absolutely. And they're slow learners. They eventually come round, but the country pays the price.
Yeah.
Rolls-Royce do have a programme you could implement with smaller modular reactors. They produce a fraction of what Hinkley would do or Sizewell would do. You need about 7 of them for one Hinkley. That's about the scale of it. I don't see any evidence they're really rolling that out either.
Well, if Nick Clegg had not stopped it happening, we'd have them.
I know.
We'd have 10 of them.
I know, and then you wouldn't need your little levy on your bill.
And we wouldn't be sitting here going,
I know.
Well, wouldn't it be great if we could get our own, energy to rely on?
Until you elect people that are capable of planning and thinking ahead, this will happen again and again. And I've said it before, it's the same with trade. They have to have a crisis before they realise, we've actually got it wrong.
Yeah, and then they fix the crisis, but the actual framework doesn't change. Let me ask you about Boris Johnson. All this week we've been asking people what they think they will remember him for. Not so much what his legacy will be, but what will you remember him for?
I think I'll remember him for an odd technique which he has, which I've met 1 or 2 people in life that have done this, which is I call flat denial. So Boris Johnson will be asked about something like the Northern Ireland Protocol, about the border in the Irish Sea, and his response, instead of addressing the issue, will be flat. No, it's not.
Yeah,
it's just not. We're not going to have that.
Right.
I said, hold on. So is the sky blue? No, it's not. Yeah. And that's what I remember from Johnson.
Yeah.
Flat denial of reality.
Yes. His statement today, when he was asked how he would like to be remembered, he was in Lewisham in south-east London yesterday. I think as the Prime Minister who in 3 years helped to bring neighbourhood crime down by 38% thanks to the work of the Metropolitan Police and others.
Right. Best of luck.
Not the greatest week to say that after the stabbing at Notting Hill The numbers of people, 200 people arrested at Notting Hill Carnival, one man stabbed to death,
I know.
a 9-year-old girl lying dead in Liverpool because drug dealers broke into a door that, completely by chance, she happened to be behind and shot her dead. You know, unbelievable.
Shocking record.
You know, Tyson Fury's own cousin is being stabbed to death in Manchester.
I know.
I mean, what the hell is he talking about? There is no law and order in this country.
No, there isn't, and until we take a sharper, firmer approach, which we need to do, and you know, people say, well, there's too many people in prison. I would say it depends on the level of criminality.
Yeah.
You need as much prison space. I mean, people forget, actually, Howard understood this, that, you know, he understood that actually prison does serve a purpose.
Yeah.
It stops the people who are in prison from committing crime while they're in prison. It's as simple as that.
The idea that somehow, it doesn't really work. Well, it works as far as the victims are concerned.
Yeah.
Because if you've had somebody break into your house and then you lock him up, while he's locked up, he's not breaking into anybody else's house.
And that's protection for society.
Yeah.
And how many times, Mike, have we heard people getting out on early release, immediately going and killing someone or you know, or breaking?
Well, look at the guy in Liverpool, who was the target of the
early
shooting.
release again.
He's now gone back into prison because he's been shot at. I mean, ridiculous.
Yeah.
The Daily Mail
Shocking.
front page today, have police given up on burglary? It's the first time the Daily Mail's asked a question on the front page to which the answer has been yes.
Yes. I mean, you'd be lucky
Normally
to get
it's
anyone
no.
to pay any attention.
You know,
that.
like, is this the most dangerous man in Britain?
Yeah.
And you go, no, it's
and
not.
yet the virtual signalling's fine. They can do that and spend money on that. So
Tell us about your star guest at the SDP conference.
We've got a conference at Manchester Central, which is the big venue there. We're not in the main. We're going to get there eventually, but we're in Manchester Central on the 8th of October, SDP conference, and the star guest is John Cleese.
Very good.
Very, very happy.
Has he joined you? Is he one of yours?
No, he was a Social Democrat in the 80s. Did two very famous party political broadcasts. So I mean, I just got in touch with him and had a meeting with him, and he's agreed to come and speak. So we're very excited about that.
Okay.
We've got Peter Whittle and Emma Webb and Rod Little.
Rod Little, of course.
Myself,
yes, absolutely.
Many others, and Joanna Williams.
In a minute, right? If I said to you, how do you fix this energy crisis? How do you make people's bills go down? What would you say?
There are only two ways of doing it. The comprehensive approach, which is to lend money directly to the energy companies and say you're not putting up the prices, and then you have a loan system. You might pay it out of over 10 or 15 years. The plus side of that is it reduces inflation, which you want to do. Downside is very crude, so you're effectively paying people who have swimming pools. The second way is to target it, which is through the tax and benefit system and universal credit. The government's been asleep. That's the situation I would have gone for, because it's slightly cheaper and more targeted on those that need it. But whether they can get that done if Truss becomes Prime Minister next week, I don't think there's enough time.
Yeah, I'm queasy about just handing out money to people, but maybe the answer...
The economy will collapse, Mike.
Yeah.
The pubs point. But there won't be any pubs unless we're in a crisis. This doesn't normally happen. It's extremely I'm basically a fiscal conservative. I'm not in favour of showering money everywhere. But the economy will collapse if the government doesn't do it, so they need to do it.
No, of course they have to do something, but maybe the answer is what you said earlier, which is to give the money to the company, so they reduce the bills, and then we don't need to give people money.
That deals with it at source.
That would be better, in my view. So William Clouston's already come up with a better idea than anybody in Parliament. Amazing, isn't it? This is Talk TV. Thanks, William. We'll see you soon. We'll